Okay, hello everyone in YouTube land. It occurred to me that I've been doing this for a while with these ACKIE'S. I've had this project. It's been going pretty well for me. I just got my first clutch. I'm very pleased and excited, and I have had success. Not an expert because I've only got the one clutch, but definitely have done something right. And I want to share that. It's hard to find a lot of good info for ACKIE'S. I've been doing research for a couple of years before I got them, so I knew what I was getting into. So I just want to try to cover all the bases here and get everything out there, and so that we can grow this great hobby. Alright, so I want to start off with the yellow Ackie monitor. Where are they from? They're from Australia. So in Australia, there's a lot of heat. It's very hot. So that's the thing that it might overwhelm you at first. The hot spot in here, right there, it can go up to 160 degrees, and that's fine for them. Now that's on the hotter side. I don't have that much heat there. You have to keep that in mind. The next thing I want to talk about is the enclosure. So right here, we have this enclosure, which I have a video on how I built it. I'm going to just cover it, go over it a little bit one more time. So what we have is these 1x3s, which pretty much frame the whole thing. We got them here on the outside here, and then we got this one here. On the back and on the bottom, we have plywood. It's 1 inch thick plywood on the bottom. I think the back is a 1/2 inch. If you're building your own cage for this, you need to have this be supported. And I probably could have used a little more support. I probably should have used 2x4s. There is a lot of pressure here. There's a lot of weight. This substrate is very heavy, and I don't even have as much as you really should have. Cover that later. So we got the wood. I built it out of wood. Wood, as many of you may know, attracts mold. So mold will grow because of the humidity levels in here and heat and everything. So you need to prevent that, combat the mold. And what I did is I actually covered the entire cage inside and out with a mold resistant paint, which I got at Home Depot. The brand is Kills. The kind I got was a little bit on the cheaper side. I went cheaper because of my budget. I would suggest not doing that. If I were to redo this, I would get a better one, because you can see there is some mold growing in there, and on the top there. My shadow doesn't cover it, but you can see there, it's not perfect. So that's something that if I were to redo it, I would put more emphasis on that. Next, what I did is, this is all caulk, and I went through, and actually the wood is held together mostly by the caulk. Now I'll open this up very carefully because I blew a light bulb earlier today. So you can see I put this here. So I drilled in and glued it together. Same there. Same for this top here, and you can see there's some more mold here. So I drilled all that in. That's all working. I have this little piece here, this beam, for support, and I actually had a ceramic heat lamp, which was attached with one of these clamps here. I clamped it right to the wood. I was using that for a while. I stopped using it because I was worried as the ACKIE'S got bigger that they might jump onto it and hurt themselves. So I don't use that anymore. It's not necessary. There's enough heat in here now as it is, so I don't need to do that. So this is plexiglass. The side here, all the sides that you can see through, they're all plexiglass. It's 1/8 inch plexiglass, and you don't 1/8 inch will work. There's only so much here where it's actually the plexiglass is holding it, but this is solid. This is a lot of, you can feel it when you push. There's a lot of pressure there. You want to get something that's good and solid. This caulk that I have, I don't know what it's called, and it dries solid. You can see here. It's solid. So here's some more here. It's not like the silicone. It's a solid adhesive. Lighting. What we have here is a halogen flood lamp bulb. Now these give a wide array. As I said before, these are from Australia. It's very hot. You need at least 130 degrees right here. And I actually put my finger on here, and it's hot. I can feel it. It's pretty hot. I wouldn't want to leave my finger there for too long. Now, how do you know? Well, you can see there are no thermometers in here. I don't use thermometers. I rarely ever do. The only thermometer I have is sitting on top of the eggs right now, so I know what temperature they are. What I use is a temp gun. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me. I left it at my parents' house down south, and I will get it next week. But usually I have it every day. If anything, I'll come by and I'll check the temperature. This is usually around 140, 130 degrees, and then each lower step of the stone, it gets a little bit cooler, down to maybe 100 or 90 at the surface of the substrate. That is what you want. Now, there's something called a Reitz stack or Reitz rack, and what it is, you can see there's different layers of plywood that they have holes cut in, and the ackies can travel through each layer, and each layer has a different temperature, so they can go in there. And the ones on top are obviously much hotter. The ones on bottom are a little cooler, so if they're hot, they go down to the bottom. If they're cold, they go up to the top, and then they can regulate their temperature very easily, very comfortably for them in that way. Now, I just didn't like the way that the Reitz stack looked, and I didn't really want to put it in my tank. I didn't want to get more sealant and cover it and worry about mold, so I used the slate rocks. You can get this anywhere. I got it for free because I had a friend. So it works really well. It holds the heat, retains it. They can sit on the rock, and that way they get heat from the top, from the light, and from the bottom because the rock gets hot. I probably would suggest using a Reitz stack because it works. A lot of people use them and get really good success. I've gotten success without using it because I didn't really like the way it looked, but that's just aesthetics. This is where some controversy comes into play. A lot of people say you don't need UVB for monitors. Some people say you do. So I have no UVB here. They've been thriving for 1.5 years, and I have my first clutch. So they don't need it to survive for at least 1.5 years and reproduce. If you want to use it, I've heard that it makes their color a little brighter, and I can say that the colors on mine are not that bright, so perhaps it does, but you don't need it. These bulbs, they're good, but I have had a lot of blowouts. This bulb actually burned out today. I don't go with the cheap bulbs. These are expensive, and that's just the way it is. This blew out today when I opened the lid. I moved the tank, and it created a little bit of rubbing here against this piece on the lid, and when that happens, it sometimes jars the light and breaks it. So that has happened a few times to me, unfortunately. Anyway, going forward, this is a halogen flood lamp with a wide beam. I believe this is a 75 watt, and I think this is a 55 watt that I have in there right now. So I've found that for my cage, 75 watts works really well. You can use whatever works for you, and I went through the gamut trying to figure it out. The 24-hour light cycle. So that means that you leave the lights on for 24 hours, and that is why these lights go out frequently, because I do leave them on 24 hours, 7 days a week. So the importance of doing that when you have a group of ackies like I do and you're breeding them, they have a hierarchy and a pecking order. So there's going to be a dominant male or female and then subsequent lesser dominant individuals. So when that happens, the dominant individual will eat first and the less dominant individuals will be left behind to get less food and also less basking time, because they regulate that as well. So to fix this problem, you create a 24-hour light. So that means when the dominant individual is sleeping, the lesser dominant individuals can come out and bask. So that gives everybody equal opportunity. Now, another thing that I probably would forget to mention, because it's second nature to me, but perhaps not to everybody else, people who are just starting in reptiles, you see how this side of the tank has the lights and it's hot, but this side doesn't. Now, I wish I had my temp gun I could show you, but I don't have that. So on this side, what you're doing is you're creating high temperature here as a temperature gradient, so it'll kind of go down on this side of the tank. So this side is usually, actually it's right near the heater, so it does get a little bit warm, but it's usually around 75, 80. And here, this side of the tank, the ambient temperature of the air in general is probably around 90 to 100. And the hot spot there, right on top of that rock, will be around 140 when I have the other bulb. So that's another thing that you want to think about, is having spares, because when things go wrong, you want to be able to correct them quickly. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the substrate. And this is one of the most important things for ackies, especially if you're breeding. I've read a lot, and there's a lot of different opinions. So I'm going to tell you what I believe. My philosophy is mimic nature as best you can. So in natural Australia, what they do is they're excellent burrow tunnelers. They burrow and they dig tunnels, and they live in those tunnels for most of the time. They come out to bask in the heat during the day, and then they go back in their tunnels at night. So you want a substrate that has the capability of being tunneled and holding the structure of the tunnel. Now, that's hard to do because they don't have necessarily a product that does that, although I did find one that does it pretty well. It is very expensive. It's called excavator clay. It's by Zoomed. I use that. That's what most of this is. There's about 75 pounds of that in here, and then mixed in with some play sand, about 50 or 60 pounds of play sand. Some dirt and eco earth is in here as well. I've tried a whole bunch of different types of sands. This is what I found that works best. I'm going to show you what I mean. So you can do this. Now if you imagine they're digging a tunnel in there. Now see that? It holds the shape. So I can stick my finger back in here, and I can go like this on the top, and I can still stick my finger in there. No resistance. So it holds the shape. Now another thing you can do is go like this, you squeeze it, and it crumbles a little bit, but you can see it kind of holds some shape. It's actually a little dry in here, so that's why it's doing that. This is another trick that you can use for your egg medium as well, and that's the same kind of thing. You don't want it to be too wet. You don't want it to be soaking, dripping water when you do that. You saw the point. If I stick my finger in there, I make a little tunnel and it holds the shape. That's what you want. Now if you look over here where the sun is directly on there, it's very dry. You want to avoid that. With this it's impossible, it's going to happen, but I try to keep it as moist as possible. And usually what I'll do is I'll take this liter water bottle, which I leave just sitting here, and I fill it up and dump it in there every few days. Depth of the substrate. Now mine is not a good example because it's not as deep as it should be. My monitors are not full grown. They are sub-adults, I guess. They're about 1.5 years old. They don't really necessarily need the depth of an adult. Now an adult will need around 12 inches. It gave me a lot of anxiety digging through this because I was so paranoid that I would squish one of the little eggs. So that's what you got to think about. Yourself as well as the ackies. They want a lot of substrate to dig in, and you want to be able to get their eggs out. So it's a balance between that. In my opinion, I would say go deeper if you can, and be very, very careful when looking for the eggs. So that brings me to the next topic, which is the tank mates, the other organisms that are living in the tank. I didn't put anything in here except for mealworms and superworms, and I ended up getting darkling beetles. And I found out after searching for the eggs that they're actually reproducing. You can see there, there's tons of beetles, and here's a superworm right here. There it is. Put it over there. Maybe one of the ackies will eat it. They're reproducing, and there's tons of beetles. I saw a couple here while I was doing the video. I don't know where they are now, but so that's fine, and they're not doing any harm. I have found that it's a little strange. The ackies will eat superworms and mealworms, but they will not eat beetles. I've heard that they have a bitter taste. I don't know if that's true. I've never tasted a beetle, but the ackies sure don't like them. The beetles will walk right past the ackies, and the ackies won't even give them a second look. So they don't like them. Doesn't do anything except when there are bits of food or morsels of whatever left in the tank. the beetles will take care of that and clean it up. So I love having them. I think they're great. Here I don't spot clean. I don't do much of anything. I'll take out some leftover food, but that's about it. Everything else is taken care of by the darkling beetles and these other little beetles, which you can see here. Get a close up. Those are confused flower beetles. Now, they aren't the only ones who are confused. I was confused as to how they got here. I'm still not really sure how they got in here. I know that a lot of cricket breeders use them in the cricket tanks to eat the leftover food, and that's exactly what they do here. They do eat all the dead crickets and keep everything going pretty well and smooth and clean. So I love having them, and I would suggest having them. If you know that these beetles are thriving in your substrate, that means you have a healthy substrate. So that's good. It's healthy, it's natural. If the beetles can survive, the ackies can survive. I guess it's kind of like a canary in the cave. If the beetles somehow all start dying, I would know that something is wrong with the substrate. Oh, here's a darkling beetle. There he is. So they are living in here, eating, breeding, and the ackies are not eating the beetles, but they are eating the larvae. Get off of me, come on. Alright. I almost forgot. There are a few problems with these tank mates, obviously, the one being that they get out. So what do you do about that? Well, there's an idea that I never got around to doing, which was putting double-sided sticky tape all around the border. The other problem, I don't know if I can find any right now. I know I have some footage somewhere of them, but there's, it seems as though the crickets like to breed, and I get little baby crickets everywhere. They will not survive to adulthood, but they are annoying and they do get out. So what I have are these spiders. You can see there's one there. There's a couple right there. Focus, there it is. And there's some here. They're on all the corners. And if you look in here, there's all sorts of cobwebs going in there. So there's a little beetle there. He's probably going to get stuck. So that helps. Oh, look, here you can even see one. There is a beetle stuck in there. So that works to keep some of the pests in and not pests of the house. Because in here they're not pests. They're welcome. So the spiders are good for that. They don't hurt anybody. They don't hurt the ackies. So that brings me to the next thing, is the crickets. They are the food source. What I do is I mainly feed them crickets because that's what I have access to. Unfortunately, I don't have a breeder colony. If you're going to set up shop with some breeders, I would suggest dubia. They're pretty easy. I've had success, but I've also had failure with dubia. I've had very, very easy success with Madagascar hissing cockroaches. I find that they breed super well, not as fast, but still relatively fast and very easily. So I would suggest those. The diet of the ackie should consist of mainly insects. In the wild, in Australia, that's what they're eating. They may come across a field mouse or something like that, some carrion, but mostly what they're eating is insects, like crickets, locusts, grasshoppers, cockroaches, things of that nature. Katydids, of course, there's loads of bugs in Australia. I don't want to name all of them, but crickets make great protein. They have great nutrition for them. Now, a lot of people are keen on feeding them pinkies, as I am. Of course, it's fun. It's, you want to see your monitor tackle a mouse and rip it up or whatever. That would be quite an interesting sight. Unfortunately, it's not very healthy for the monitor. It's okay, but they've evolved as dwarf monitors to eat small, tiny little things like insects. So that's what's going to be best for them. Now, a lot of people will supplement their diet with some minced meats like turkey, ground turkey, or ground beef. I wouldn't suggest ground beef just because I don't think they would ever eat beef in the wild. What I do sometimes is when I'm having chicken and I cut off the scraps, I will throw in some chicken scraps in here, and they seem to eat that. You don't want to cook the food. It denatures it. They're not used to eating denatured food. They eat whole foods not from Whole Foods, the store, but from Whole Foods, meaning they eat a whole cricket. They're not going to eat the cricket legs or eat the chicken wing. Whatever it is that they eat the whole thing. They eat the bones, the marrow, the veins, the vessels, organs. They eat all of that. So the more whole foods that they have, the healthier they're going to be. Now, next thing is water. So I have a water dish in here. It's right here. I don't usually put water in here. I did for a while when the substrate was not good. But now that the substrate is good, I don't really need to put water in there. Every once in a while I'll put some water in there. But they don't usually like to drink. They actually don't really like water in general. You can have it and not need it, but you don't want to need it and not have it. So I would suggest don't be lazy like I am and always fill up the water bowl. So that's that for water. They don't usually drink. They get their water from their surroundings and from their diet. Think back to Australia. There's not a whole lot of water there where they're from. They have the monsoon, a yearly kind of wet season that's where they get a lot of water. Again, you want to replicate the natural environment. So that's that. Okay, so that has been the care sheet. That's what I found works for me. You gotta find what works for you. But I hope that my success will help others. And I hope it helps. And if you have any questions, please, please, please let me know. Subscribe, rate, comment, ask away if there's something I missed. If there's something I said that's blatantly wrong, please tell me.
Is he responding?
Yeah.